I'm Lexi Davis, a love embodiment coach who helps people create a love that feels like home, and I'm here to bring more romance and playfulness into the world. I'm also an international retreat host, vibe curator, and human connector. I serve people through my business, Alive to Enjoy, and this podcast where I invite guests from around the world to sprinkle their wisdom and expand your perspective so you can create the deepest love you possibly can reach in this lifetime. I also want you to live the most joyous life, whatever that looks like to you, and I hope that this slice of the internet brings you lots of smiles and helps you keep your heart open. Thank you for choosing Heart Snuggles to be in your ears each week, and I'm so glad you're here with me. Welcome, Heart Snugglers. So excited for another day with you. And today we have beautiful Nina, who is such a pure heart and full of wisdom and love. And I'm so excited to share her with you guys. So I'd love if you give them a little introduction about you.
Oh, Alexi, I'm really honored to be here and in this space and with your community. I just love having these deep, devotional, expansive conversations. So I'm just excited to arrive and be in this and walk beside you and whatever wants to come up and move through in our space together. And yeah, I'm Nina. I am a faith-based and feminine leadership mentor for women with a big, bold vision on their hearts to co-create a more beautiful world for us all. And I can't even call it a business at this point. It really is a ministry. My ministry is called Way of Grace, which is really devoted to the restoration of the feminine through relationship with God and remembrance of beloved identity and reconciling with the masculine. So a lot of really big, juicy, deep devotional topics, themes, explorations are threaded in our space. And yeah, it's just been such a joy in my life to walk beside other women as we really come into this remembrance of walking the true way of the heart, which to me is all about bringing love where it hasn't gone before. And first, that love gets to be poured into our own cells and soma and holy waters and beingness as women.
Yes, I love it. And I love the way you just channel and speak. It's always so like comforting and beautiful. So thank you. And I'm so excited.
So excited.
So the first question of the podcast is, what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you?
Oh my goodness. I love that it's what someone did for me that really has me like sink into that state of receptivity in my system. And, this month, November, has been a very full month for me of celebration because I eloped to my beloved in the beginning of the month. We just had our second wedding ceremonial celebration with our family. So there's just been so many gifts, so many blessings that have come our way. But I would say, this last week we were in Georgia with our families, and Will's family, which is my now husband, my partner, my beloved, his family, always opens their home to us on a beautiful farm on 400 acres of land in Georgia. And it's just stunning, sacred land. And we got to get married on that property under a waterfall. And we were just blessed, to utilize that land, to speak our vows on that land, to have our cake and our flowers and the arrangements, and just so much also provision from my own father and making this celebration happen. And it really widened my own capacity to receive, because I'm definitely too someone who has been more templated to do it all herself. So it's actually been quite edgy in my life to receive in these ways. And really a big part of our feminine restoration is restoring our capacity to receive. We are designed as women to receive so that we then can give back devotionally to the world around us.
Yes. Oh, what a beautiful celebration. That's amazing that it was on that land, and feels like so many pieces just fit together so So amazing.
It
Yeah.
was beautiful. Yeah, super blessed.
Congrats.
Thank
Okay. And the second question is, what is a more hard or shameful memory you have from when you're younger about relationships or sex?
mm. Whew. Could go on a whole exploration of this. Yeah, I guess the biggest, like personally, the biggest imprint that I've had to work through around my sexuality and sensuality, and I believe, the sexual shadow is the most prevalent shadow on earth. I believe that we are fractured from our bodies in a really big way. And, this is through societal programming, religious indoctrination, family system experiencing of what sexuality and sensuality means. And I think all of us in some way have deemed our bodies as shameful or sinful or wrong or bad. And for many of us, that imprint begins very early on when we're just in the beginning of exploring the beauty of our bodies and starting to become devotionally curious around our bodies. And often, most of us did not have, a good steward and someone who was cultivating this safety to have this curiosity around our bodies and to even just really be the sensual beings that we are beyond sexuality. We are highly sensual, especially as women, to receive and feel the world through our senses. So for me personally, it was when I was, I think, around 7 or 8. And I feel I've heard this story from quite a few women, so I know I'm not alone in this, but around that time, I actually discovered humping like as a coping mechanism. I think I was doing it as a self-regulation strategy because when I was a young child as well, there was a lot of emotional turbulence and chaos in my home. So my home environment was often unsafe. So I learned to kind of control my environment as best as I could. And I think I learned, through my body, this coping strategy to relieve stress that I was constantly navigating because of the chaos in my external environment. And my mom had caught me doing that on the couch. And I'll never forget, she had looked at me and I was 7 and she said, if you keep doing this, you'll never be able to have babies. And as a young girl, I played with Barbies. I'm like all about babies. I want a baby. I was templated in the mother frequency. It's just such an innate part of my beingness naturally. So when she said that, it was like this siphoning of my safety to not trust my body, to shame, any pleasure in my body. And I carried that for a number of years, not that it was conscious, but even through relationships and intimacy, I personally had struggles and trouble with orgasm. I only just had my first orgasm like a few years ago, and I'm now 35. So, this was like a big thing that got templated in my system that I've had to very devotionally bring consciousness and love and grace and compassion to. And I feel for every woman, our path is this descent into our bodies. And in that descent, we are confronted with these traumas and wounds and fractures. And for me, the initial pathways through forgiveness and, having forgiveness to my mom and, knowing that she didn't know any better at the time and her own sensuality and sexuality had also been fractured from a very young age, and forgiveness to my own body. And again, it's like that process of just bringing and pouring love where it hasn't gone before.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's so, it's just so sad that the parents don't know, but then we get and it's just this journey
It's a
that
cycle.
keeps, yeah, it's a cycle. And so I'm so proud of you for realizing and taking your, ownership of that and bringing the love in that needed to be there. And yeah, it's like, I believe too, like the relationships with our bodies are so important and there's unlimited wisdom
Everything.
within them. And so
Yeah.
rebuilding that is so essential. And I would love for you to share your journey on, you talked just a little briefly about this, the descent of the feminine into the womb and why we need to do that as women.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, it's a potent path. And I think, again, it can feel initially quite paradoxical, and the feminine is very paradoxical in her nature. There's a lot of divine paradoxes that we move through, but I think, we're so entrained to believe that the path is ascension, going up, right? Up to the mountain, up towards enlightenment, nirvana, higher consciousness, like ascending out of our bodies to become more spiritual. And that is not the path of the feminine. The masculine path is one of ascension. They are designed to move up in consciousness, but the feminine path is of descension down into the body, the heart, the womb, because this is where we touch matter itself, which is connected to the mother, the matrix, like the depths of the soil that we exist and stand upon. And that lives within the feminine body as this deep cellular remembrance in our soma. And for me personally, I've always had a relationship and connection to my body. And whenever anyone asks me, what is like the journey that's brought you to where you are today, I always say it's been through the body. I've been devoted to the body my whole life, and I wasn't always living in my body, but I was very much a witness of my body. I danced my entire life. I was classically trained in ballet and all forms of dance. So I was always engaged in a movement practice. And then I studied and trained in yoga for, years and taught that. And I studied somatics and trauma. And I also have my master's degree in occupational therapy, which is a very body-based therapeutic. So so much of my life was devoted to learning, studying, understanding the body. But it really wasn't until probably around 2016, when I went off of birth control, that I began my actual descent into my body. Because I think, like many listeners, I was on the hormonal birth control pill for 10 years, which completely fractures us from our feminine core and from our intuition and from this gnosis that lives within us. It siphons our potency and our feminine power. And to me, it's no coincidence that at the age that we're coming into womanhood, many of us are just given this pill to siphon the expression of our womanhood. And that could bring me to tears, because it's quite heartbreaking that has been the reality for so many women, especially I know of my generation. So when I made that choice to go off the pill, I then had to go through this massive initiation, because I got very sick after, because the pill just masks a lot of these deeper things that are going on. So I kind of, for like another year, went into this deep study of hormones and health and emotions and energetics. And I was just really brought down and in. And for the first time, I started to hear the voice of my womb, who had been so suppressed for all of those years that she was on the pill. And there was like this emergence of clarity and truth that began to come through my system, but it wasn't in the mind. It was like so deep down, like this low voice in my body, like down in my pelvis, my hips, that whole sacral region of myself, which was new for me to touch, as embodied, quote unquote, as I was. There had still been a disconnect from that level of embodiment and relational intimacy with myself. And then it was, just like a year later, I actually got pregnant. I was with a partner at the time, and we had a very tumultuous, triggering relationship, one of the great relationships of my life, because it really was the path for me to become initiated into my feminine maturity. As hard as it was also holy. And when we got pregnant, I chose to have an abortion, and that really catalyzed this descent, because in that choice, and after going through that experience, I then had to face
Mm.
all of these emotions that had been stuffed and suppressed and pushed away for a number of years. Grief, anger, rage, sadness, despair. I went through like a 2-year period of, you know, I wasn't like diagnosed as depressed, but it was, like a form of depression that I was experiencing. And that time was so holy, because really it's through that time that I began to come back into relationship with God and come back into relationship with my heart and really go into this deep space of healing and forgiveness and compassion and grace and letting go and releasing all of these wounds and these traumas that I had carried for so long. And it also initiated me into very deep healing with my mother, who was like the hardest person for me in my life up until that point. She's been my greatest teacher in forgiveness and compassion, because we've had so many challenges, and I have withheld my love from her the most out of anybody else that I've ever experienced. So that journey was, this holy descent, like, which is really just a dropping down and in and meeting your feelings, meeting yourself so fully and devotionally, holding and tending to that little girl, nurturing, her hurts, her wounds, her fears, all of those experiences, and then resurrecting, this mother in you, like this nurturing, compassionate presence that's able to bring that love where it hasn't gone before. And then also, eventually for me, it was coming back into relationship with the masculine face of God and healing as well with the Holy Father, which was like my ultimate healing restoration, was through him and through God's unconditional love and grace, because we only learn love by being known by love and knowing God's love, because it's boundless and relentless and just immeasurable. It's like so overwhelming beyond what we can fathom. So in healing my relationship with him, I also healed, that kind of backbone and frame of the masculine, that we rest in as women. So, there's a lot of layers to that whole process, but that's essentially some of some of what was going on during that specific period of my life and the beginning of my feminine descent.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful how through the whole journey you really chose surrender and were like you opened to the experiences. I'm sure not always in the
Oh, wasn't easy.
I
I
know.
was I was forced there for sure.
Yeah.
And it's big because, surrender, it's not something, as much as we're like, oh, I want to surrender and open and receive it. For me, initially it came with a lot of resistance, because I had to let go of control. I had to just have blind trust and faith in what was happening. I had to sit in the unknown, the uncertainty, and to really just rest in God's magnificence and to trust that he would resurrect a miracle through what felt like a complete mess. And really that beauty would rise from the ashes. And there is like there's a choice point, because in these moments we can easily spiral into victimhood and our pain body and just the projection of our wounds and our traumas, which can get really entangled with entitlement and our preferences and our expectations. Or we can surrender into truth and start to move into this deeper wellspring of love and compassion and understanding and grace, and to take like that higher seat, to sit on the throne and to witness how it's all happened for me. And I can use this pain for a higher purpose, and I can transmute these wounds into wisdom, and I can use this for the calling that God has on my life.
Yeah, it's such a powerful choice, but one of the hardest choices to continue to
So
make.
hard.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd love to touch a little bit more on you just kind of talked about like the devotion versus kind of collapsing. And that's such a big topic because it's quite hard to not contract and have these big yearnings and desires, and you're like, why is my life falling apart? And yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is a big learning. I would say, this is like a foundational teaching at Way of Grace is learning how to hold yourself and be held by God. I really believe that process is like our deepest feminine devotion and responsibility. Like we have to become sovereign and responsible for ourselves, because if we don't, the stickiness of not is going to show up in your relationships. It's going to show up in your partnerships. It's going to show up in romance and all of these areas in your business, everything. And, coming back to this like essence of holding ourselves requires responsibility and maturity, which a lot of women resist responsibility because we think it's a burden instead of seeing responsibility as a blessing. And many of us, because we had two, maybe mothers and sisters and grandmothers who lived in victimhood and who projected their pain body. So that's the example that was potentially set for us, right? And to see the woe is me and life is so hard. And again, just this perpetuation of that trauma and the pain and the ancestral patterns. It's a radical choice to move beyond that. And this choice as women, and I'm sure all the women listening, and I know you, Lexi, we're chain breakers. We're deciding to break these generational curses that we've carried. We're choosing to lay at the altar this collective pain, the pain and the wounds of our lineage. And we're really deciding, I'm going to write a new story, because this isn't just for me, but this is for the future sons and daughters of the earth, like quite literally. And this has been like huge for my journey in preparation for motherhood, to really decide, what do I want to pass on genetically to my offspring, to my children. And that really was a big catalyst for me of erecting this responsibility and choosing, I'm going to transmute these things and cultivate new patterns. And we can only do that through awareness in slow motion space. And again, grace, compassion, love, forgiveness, curiosity, not blaming, making ourselves wrong, but really coming to this state where we're cultivating flexibility and resiliency in our nervous system. We know how to anchor safety in ourselves, and we know ultimately that we're held by God, which is our ultimate safety and belonging. And I feel that begins to restore this kingdom consciousness in us as women. And again, I always say, like, a kingdom woman is a woman who knows how to hold herself. Like, she takes responsibility for her actions, her beingness, her choices, her decisions. And as women, when you realize how creational you are, because you're wildly creational, you're always creating, this really awakens us to the potency that we have, that we're always setting a tone in every area that we're existing in, because ultimately life in the masculine is responding to us. So who am I being? Because who I'm being is getting a response, right? Externally. So it's like we have to look at ourselves and, again, not bypass the emotions and all the things. Like, we get to feel it all and to feel the density, but to not get stuck in the density and not get stuck in the collapse and the spiral into the story. And we really get to go beyond that and arrive back to truth. What is actually true? And what do I actually want to cultivate in my life? And what are my desires? And what is required of me to become magnetic for those things to come to me, right? Because that's up to me and the tone and the frequency that I'm emitting from my core of who I am as a woman.
Yeah. And then the process of opening to receive when it arrives, because so often it comes and we're not even recognizing that we aren't receiving it.
Amen. Oh, yeah. And this is where, yeah, and a lot of women, this can get really sticky because this goes into provision, which, we're always like, okay, I want it like this, but we don't always get it like that. And something I always say is, God works for your good, not for your preferences. And provision itself is what God in life sees as most rightful for you in advance. And that might be something uncomfortable. It might be something that isn't the way that you wanted it, but it's for your highest good. And this is again where, yeah, it's a big opening to receive and be in true intimacy with life itself, and to not resist life and provision and what God is trying to penetrate you with. A lot of women, a big desire, I think, for many is, like wealth, money, like, really healing, again, a lot of the generational curses that have been carried and imprints around that. And sometimes, God provides by not giving you anything, or having you steward and really learn how to manage what you do have and be grateful for what you do have, because it's only in that that you then become a vessel for more. If you can't steward what is already right in front of you, right? If you're in just that state of resistance and pushing away, how can God ever bless you with more? Like, you have to show that you are devotionally responsible and in thankfulness of what is here right now, and not just wishing for what could be or what needs to come for me to be whole, worthy, whatever the story is. It's like you have to find that right now in this moment. Like, you have to anchor that in your body.
And that's so related to relationship as well, like wanting that divine union and not having that. And then,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another, yeah, big desire that women hold. And that's a holy initiation as well, because, I think a lot of women too, we get so caught up in, okay, who does this man need to be? And what are all of the things that I want him to be? And for me personally, I mean, that's how I was in the beginning. And then God like flipped the table on me, and I started hearing him say, who do you get to be to receive the man I want for you? And really, again, taking that radical responsibility. What did I need to clean up in my life? Do I actually have space to receive the great love that I desired? Where was I pushing away masculine provision and rightfulness? Like, really looking at very deep patterns and beliefs around God, men, the masculine, maleness. Like, this is a huge part of our journey as women, is to repair and really reconcile with the masculine itself. That's what really begins to expand our feminine fullness, and really is a humbling journey of then really witnessing, wow, where have I resisted the masculine, or resisted God and tried to do everything on my own, or again, like collapse into my desire and spiral into, yeah, being a victim of why it hasn't happened yet.
And I would love to hear your journey with God and that relationship, because I feel like it's becoming a lot more popular to lean into that now. And I had so much resistance because I didn't grow up religious. So yeah, let's tackle this.
Oh, yeah, this is huge. And this is like the backbone to everything, because this relationship has shifted and transformed and transfigured my entire life. And I totally understand why people are resistive to God. I was too. And I didn't grow up strictly religious. I wasn't, you know, indoctrinated into like the dogma of religion, but that is a very real thing for a lot of women, because unfortunately, religion in many ways has created a big fracture from our relational design with God, believing that God is a hierarchy and you have to do all the right things and go through a middleman to get to God. And, it's just so wild because my relation and reference point with God is through Christ. But when we really look at what Christ was doing, was he was never here to create a religion. He was here to transcend the entirety of that and really create this inclusivity, which is all centered around love and like walking in love. My favorite scripture is from John 4:16, which says, God is love. Those that live in love live in God, and God lives in them. We are here to be in relational intimacy with God. It's not a religion, it's a relationship. And for me, I spent as a young girl a lot of time actually very deeply connected to God and very connected to Jesus and Mother Mary when I was a child. And I would talk to them. I always felt like this divine presence, this energy that was bigger and beyond me, but holding me, wrapping me. And I believe too that presence and the gnosis of that presence got me through a lot of really hard things in my life. Like I could always feel that light in all of the darkness that, I did face through childhood. But then it was later in high school, college that I resisted and kind of rebelled and then got into the new age and kind of all these other, realms of spirituality, which was, beautiful to explore in my journey. I'm grateful for all of it. But in that space, God can become a very impersonal concept. And again, like this cosmic blob or, everyone is God, you are God, and still this like self-sourcing energy, which ultimately is very unfulfilling and very draining and depleting, especially for our feminine system. So for a long time, I had used universe, source, all of these other things. And it wasn't until, that experience in 2017 when I had my abortion that I started calling out for God, like on my bathroom floor, praying to God. Like it was very clear. And I was starting to develop this personal relationship. And I started to feel that loving, benevolent presence again that I had remembered when I was a child. So that started to cultivate itself. And then it was in 2020 when I moved to Colorado, I was just sitting on my bed and, the world was very chaotic as it is now, at that time. And a lot of, like, polarization and, just a lot of things. And I just remember I was sitting on my bed and I was just praying for truth. I was like, God, show me truth. God, show me truth. God, show me truth. And I had this really profound encounter with Christ and just this presence of love. And it quite literally shattered my heart open. My body leaned back. And I just was so immersed in this love and grace. Like I can't even describe in words because it's just so beyond what I can tangibly share. It was such a visceral, deep, embodied encounter and experience. But in that moment, I then came down on the side of my bed and I just said, I hand over my will to thy will. I surrender to you. Like I felt truth in that moment. And that truth was revealed to me, through Christ. And again, it was like this coming back home to love, to this other centered love, and to realize and recognize that God is the source. Everything else is a resource, which is something my dear friend Jen says. But to realize like we're in this co-creative dance, we're in this union first with God, and I believe in the triune God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. But your heart is in that, it's union unto being. It's this relational oneness. It's this orientation to other-centered love, which starts to change your entire perspective of reality. Because for me, this is what really opened, again, deep levels of love, compassion, grace, forgiveness, like all of these energies. And for me as a woman, it was just this divine surrender that I got to lean into this steady frame. Again, God is loving, unconditionally loving, benevolent, generous, safe, steady, stable, like all of those qualities of the high masculine is who God is. And we get to be held by that.
Uncoupling or breakups do not need to be horrific and ugly, but they can be the most beautiful unwinding of a union. And you get to decide if you're going to let this heartbreak hold you back from love or open you wider to an even greater love and ability to choose yourself. And if you desire to shift this archaic way of ending relationships and instead be a leader in love, then I invite you to join my Holding Heartache Masterclass so you can remain in love, trust, and integrity with your heart. And this will be a powerful way to close out that chapter with your past lover, to somatically feel through the tough emotions and create a solid foundation of support to hold you through the process of grief and letting go. You'll get a clear, reliable, and comforting kit of resources and tools so that you never feel alone or stuck during this process. And I created this masterclass so you'll feel empowered to make it through the painful process and come out the other end anchored in truth and more rooted in love. I want to remind you that your heart isn't broken, you're being opened wider, and thus you're being able to feel more alive. So if you'd like to access the Holding Your Heartache Masterclass with me, Lexi Davis, head to the show notes and sign up.
In relationship with, which for me just like took all of this pressure off of me. Everything I was carrying of I have to do it on my own and I have to control and I have to have it all figured out. God was like, let me just take that from you and let me remind you who you are, which is my beloved. And I'm walking right beside you. I have your hand every step of the way. Like, you don't have to believe you need to do this by yourself. Like, I am here. I'm your frame. I'm your backbone. I'm your loving father that like wants the best for you and will always guide you, exactly where you need to go and support you and who you need to be. And yeah, it was just like this exhale, like a huge exhale that happened in my life.
Oh, it's so yummy because as a feminine, we want that feeling. We so deeply desire it, but haven't had, most of us haven't even touched that. And so to trust in that. And yeah, there's so many layers there. But first, I want to ask you, if someone is trying to connect with God and they're not feeling him or connecting, how does that process? How do you start to, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I always, just encourage women, again, like what I did, just if you feel open to it, like pray for truth. Like when your heart is ready. And again, I think I received it in that way and at that time because my heart was open and ready to be penetrated in that way, because God is that high masculine consciousness. It's a penetration. The masculine energy is penetrative, and God as well, is unconditionally loving. But if we think of, father energy, fathers provide guidance. There is a firmness, there's a direction, and it's done in a kind, benevolent way, but there's adjustment and correction that the father and the masculine offers. And many women, we've resisted that. So we like push that away and we've made that wrong. And I can do it myself. I'm a goddess. We exalt ourselves in this process and path of coming back to God is not exalting yourself. It's humbling yourself. And not to say, this isn't saying God is higher than you, because he's not. He comes to meet you face to face, heart to heart, breath to breath. But it's like taking you down into your body and into this deeper place of love. And again, this remembrance that you're not doing this on your own. So it's like coming back into this communion, this relationship. And I just advise women too, to just get to know the true heart and character of God, get curious. You can start in prayer, which to me is just a conversation. God is, like your best friend. You can talk to God the way you would with any person you love and trust in your life. And because it's a relationship, it does require time
Mhm.
and trust and intimacy to be built. So it doesn't always happen overnight. A lot of women, when I share my experience, because it was a very profound encounter, but I can look back and I'm like, well, that was a huge reorientation and encounter, but I was in process to that for a number of years. Like a number of years, I was starting to open my heart in that way. So I really believe it's a journey of coming into our hearts as women. So again, shattering the shields that you've held around your heart, where you've closed yourself off, where you've restricted your vulnerability. And again, can you bring your heart to God? Can you reveal what's on your heart? You can share your frustration with him. You can share your anger. You can share your rage. You can share where you felt abandoned, left behind, forgotten about. Like, you get to bring that. He can hold and handle it all, because it's never God that has separated himself from us. It's us who've separated ourselves from him. So the entire gospel itself is really about this reparation of relationship. It's really coming back to the remembrance that God has been waiting for you with open arms all along, but you have to decide and reclaim that you're worthy of being held in the highest love, right? And like, that's where our healing of this orphanhood comes into play, and healing these fractures of where we've believed we have been separate because of our shame, because of our experiences, because of our traumas, because of the experience that we had with our own mothers and fathers, right? We often project the imperfections of man onto God. So to just start getting curious around, God's true heart and character, which for me is revealed exclusively in Christ, is getting to know Yeshua, Jesus. To me, Christ is the embodiment of everything God has to say about himself. So that was a journey of reading and studying and going into the gospel. And I think the Bible is a beautiful resource, but it's not something that, was even my first way of understanding God, because it was a felt thing. It was a relational thing. It was an embodied exploration, but scripture and the word can help to get to know God's heart and character. I think it's helpful for women too, to be around other women who are also exploring their relationship with God, and to be in fellowship, and to be in sisterhood, and to be in conversations where we get to have devotional, curious discussions about God and healing with God, and what that process has been like. I think is just beautiful for the opening. And again, just going back to prayer, it's just like, just bring your heart, and you can ask God, how can I receive you? How can my heart be more open to receive you more fully? And just be open to then the guidance that he'll bring through in a multitude of ways. Again, it might be a friend handing you a book. It might be hearing a podcast. It might be, a sign, like, out somewhere. Like, he'll speak to you in a number of ways, but you have to just be open to receiving how he's moving his word through you. And again, the first step is just healing like our beliefs around God, and really just looking at those things. Like, what do I believe about God? What do I feel is true? What do I feel isn't true? And that is it's a process for women. Like, I was in that process for almost 2 years. Like, I was in that deep reconciliation and healing for quite a while. Although I had that strong conviction and gnosis, like, there was still then this big journey of healing, and really healing to, where religion had inundated me unconsciously with, these false things, and, just all of the things. There's a lot of untangling. But yeah, ultimately it's a journey of coming home to your heart. So how can you connect more to your heart? Prayer, fellowship, understanding God's character again.
Yes, it's so beautiful. And I really love how you make it known that it's not through like the middleman or the text or anything that you find him, because we all have that relationship directly with him.
It's exactly. And I think that's just such a powerful remembrance for women, is to know, like, this is a personal relationship that is unique to you. And again, like you're going this like gnosis and like communion with God is going to come directly from within your own heart. You know, you don't need anything outside of you, although there's, you know, helpful things that we can lean upon as we're growing in our faith. But it's like, yeah, the depth of understanding and embodied conviction is going to come from your own heart, and just this relational intimacy, this feeling, you know, of God's presence, which is love. So I always say too, it's like whatever is bringing you closer to love is of God. Whatever feels like it's pushing you away from love is not of God. So there's also that discernment that we erect, you know, through the Holy Spirit, which is wildly important on this path, because there is a lot of illusions, again, through the church, through religion, through a lot of different facets. So that's why this anchor in developing, again, personal relationship is something that's cultivated between you and God, your heart and God's heart.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk a little bit about this almost the spaciousness that you need to cultivate as a woman to really like slow down and hear and listen and trust and yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. Spaciousness is such a pillar. And I feel, yeah, it's like we only, just like with our healing, I always say healing happens in slow motion spaces. You know, relationship with God happens in spaciousness, because how can God penetrate you and come into communion with you when you're constantly busy and going and doing and achieving and filling your schedule and not having any time to exhale? And really, you know, God brings us into a position of rest. I believe we only fully receive God when we're in a state of rest, and God reorients us to rest. This is something my pastor has been talking about a lot. You know, when we're in that state of restlessness and worry and anxiety, and again, all of the busyness and the chaos that we create, you know, we can't hear and feel God, because we're now more captive to often our ego and not to the flow of love in our bodies and our systems. And for me, yeah, this path has really invited me to slow down and to create space in my life to sit in nature, to just have that quiet time, to spend my mornings in tea and conversation with God. And again, just feeling that presence of love and being held in that love and really giving space to listen. And I always say, you know, God, at least for me, speaks to me in a whisper. And I believe he speaks in a whisper so that we come closer to his heart. So that again, we remove the distractions and all of the external noise to actually hear him and his word and his truth. So, you know, I really believe this journey takes you through, yeah, a cleansing and a purification of where you've kept yourself in distraction and striving. And again, like pushing your worth externally instead of anchoring it with God and in this like internal gnosis of belonging and wholeness.
And how does a woman start to trust that and like release the attachment to money? Like when you don't work this much, and how, you know, like how can she trust that she will be provided for in those moments?
Mm. Oh, this is so big. This has been a big part of my journey. And you know, I feel, you know, ultimately, and it's always hard because I don't consider, you know, the Christianity has been so tainted. So I even hesitate calling myself a Christian, although I do believe
Mhm.
I am Christian in the most orthodox way, like from this really deep relational place. But I believe, yeah, this relational intimacy, Christianity itself is rooted in trust. You know, trust is what we have to anchor into. Walking with God is walking in trust, walking in faith. Faith itself is having hope for the unseen. And for me in my life, God can do so much more with your trust and your faith and your surrender than you can do with your control and your pressure and your forcing and your striving. So again, I really believe that God multiplies through our peace. And this seems so counterintuitive for us as women who we've been conditioned into, I have to hustle to make money or get clients or all the things. It's like that tyrannical masculine that like crack the whip, like you better do these things, write all these emails, create this content to make sure you're going to be abundant, to make sure that, you will be provided for. We attach being provided for with doing, which God's way is through being. He provides through being. And feminine, we have to come back into beingness. Our beingness is our magnetism. This is our innate emanation. And, I know it's so hard to think, well, what if I do less? But at least in my journey, as I've slowed down, that's when I'm penetrated with the clarity that actually creates the momentum for more. So again, when we're constantly distracted, anxious, worried, we can't be penetrated with God's calling and will for us. We're trying to still control and do it on our own means and by our own will. And again, the walk with him is being obedient to his will, not our will. And again, leaning into that trust, having that faith, and really cultivating that stillness so you can hear where he wants to move you. And for me, God stripped me a lot a couple of years ago. Funny enough, when I was meeting my now husband, my business before this was like 5-figure months, doing really well, like, created like 6 figures within a year, like just total, like, like just booming. And then I met my beloved, and my business started to die and decay. And that was God's initiation for me of really trusting in his provision and letting myself be provided for multidimensionally. Again, not even just through money, because that's only one form of provision, but again, really being receptive to how God wanted to support me and work through me, which at that time was slowing down and getting more clear on what I was actually doing and my mission. And it was like a year of kind of being in that secret place, being unsure where money was coming from sometimes, although God always provided or gave me the clarity of a step to take for, financial provision to come through. Like there is a co-creation. As women, you're not just leaning back and doing nothing. Like you are holding a form of listening, attentiveness, attunement to also be obedient to what God speaks through you. He's not going to do it for you. Like you're co-creating with him. You're listening to his guidance, and you're taking that, emboldened and inspired action. And doing that and really being in that state of listening opened all of these avenues of unexpected provision for me, because it was just from, again, my trust and my obedience in him, of really following, again, the things that didn't make sense, like telling me to release programs, to not run. Like it was really scary. And even just in the past few months, God really spoke to me, like, you want to become a mother, like you need to cultivate more space. Like I've been reformatting the entire model of my business this past year, which has been totally edgy and really scary. And God asked me to release one-on-one clients, which is like my baseline of financial sustainability. And he said, you got to let this go. Like you got to call your energy back to you. And I was terrified to do that. But again, I trusted his guidance, his lead, I followed. And in doing that, my other spaces have expanded tremendously, because again, that was ultimately what he wanted to provide for me, is to work less, but to actually hold more. So there was like, again, it's like this internal shift that we have to create in ourselves, that no matter what, I can trust in God's goodness. He will always protect and provide for me. And I am co-creating with him. Like I have to listen and truly be obedient to his direction, because in that I will open myself to receive the miracles that he wants for me, but I can't try to do it by my own will and by my own way and through my own pressure and control of what I think is going to work, because often you just don't know the how. We don't know it. God will orchestrate the how. You have to trust that he's going to orchestrate that perfectly and divinely.
Yeah, it's so so much easier said than done.
Oh yeah,
I've
totally.
struggled so much, but but when you do see, like, when you do go and lean into the trust, like, you will be rewarded and you'll feel that support, and it's so divine. So, yeah.
So divine. Yeah. And I think too, it's like, especially with money, it's for me, there was also this like detachment of my worth around money, which I think, again, for so many women, we get really attached to my worth being connected to success, how well my business is doing, to how many clients I have, to how much money I make. And, I think it's hard in our field, Lexi, like in coaching, we see, quantum leaps and this like overnight seeming success. And what I will say, at least in my experience, walking with God is the path of steadiness and sustainability. It's not this overnight, like, boom, that happens, because you're also walking a path of integrity. So in that, there is going to be ups and downs, and that's our feminine journey. It's nonlinear. It's like, it's not this like just up and up and up. It's like up and down. It's life, death, life. Like, it's just that way as we're in this feminine being and expression and devotion and path itself. So I think for women, it's like, once you can find your true worth and wholeness in God and as his beloved daughter, there just becomes this like unshakable safety and steadiness that gets calibrated in your system that then allows you to be the steward for God's goodness and his abundance and his wealth. And the more that he does want to bless you with, but like, you have to anchor that worth first in him. Like, it can't be outsourced and all of these other things.
Yes, it's so beautiful and so true. And
Yeah.
I love to quickly touch, which you kind of already are, on this like mature feminine and the motherhood archetype that
Yeah.
a lot of us women so deeply desire. And I've known since I was a little girl that I've desired this. And yeah, like, for so long, I was also afraid to even claim it because I didn't have a partner. So I was like, oh, I don't want to, step into that. But now I've really opened myself to that and really seen changes. But I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. There's like such a beautiful initiation from maiden to mother. And I feel a lot of women are walking this path in this way right now. And I do believe the initiation begins, when you declare and decide the desire to become a mother. And again, some of us will quite literally mother and birth physical babies and beings. And some of us are birthing creative projects and, love in other ways that's fueled towards, nieces and nephews and whatever it is, right? Like, I don't want to confine the path to mother by just having a baby. Like, it is multidimensional in many ways, but then there is like this essence of mother that I think does get initiated through labor and through birth. And I think the preparation for that as women is, again, this journey into spaciousness, this journey into, erecting this maturity, this responsibility, this ability to hold ourselves and be held by God. For me and my path, it's been deep devotion to my health, my energy, my body. So again, untangling all of those masculine paradigms and ways of being, of hustling, forcing, pressuring, controlling. It's like really honoring my feminine cycles and rhythms and really working at the pace of my body, not the pace of the world, which again is like a big initiation for us as women to reclaim that. And, a lot of healing with my mother line and the maternal. And I think it's this really building of deep compassion, love, and grace, what we've talked about in ourselves, like bringing love where it hasn't gone before, like really tending to these fractured parts, these wounds, these things that we've carried, and just walking this way of grace and devotion and curiosity with those things. And yeah, it's just coming like into this state and space of wholeness in myself. Like it's just this feeling of, again, like everything I need is right here, and God loves me for who I am right now in this moment. And I get to lean upon him and trust too in this journey, like his timing and his direction and his perfection. And when I will be blessed with a baby in my womb, and to relinquish my control around that and to really trust in his greater plan, which is again very humbling because we're so used to wanting to control and have it our way. And it's this walk of trust and faith and having hope for the unseen, and finding that like steady ground in ourselves as women, really cultivating what we call it way of grace, a strong backbone and open heart. It's like this union of maturity, responsibility, discipline, obedience, stewardship with devotion, curiosity, trust, surrender, receptivity, fluidity, right? It's like having that, think of a queen, right? I think like the mother and the queen to me can become very similar. And, a queen knows who she is. She's sovereign in herself. She's responsible for her actions, her behaviors, her beliefs. And she also is held by the king, right? And she's like leaning into that frame of protection and provision and grace and goodness so that she can be, this full expression of beauty and love and service to the world around her. So, yeah, I think the mother for us as women too, it's really learning how to nurture ourselves. And for me, that was coming back to the earth, like a lot of healing with the earth. And again, just restoring myself with the cycles of the earth and just cultivating this nourishment and nurturance in my own body. Because when you become a mother, you're going to be the nutritive force for that little being. So how are you first resourcing yourself? How are you really honoring your needs and taking care of you?
Yeah, it's been one of my biggest journeys. I also had a hard relationship with my mother, and I became the mother to everyone else in my life. And it's the journey of, oh, wait, I need to mother myself and give myself that love that I'm giving out. And yeah, it's such a beautiful process. And I think a lot of us women need to learn that, to even, like you said, even if you're not having a child, like to be that love for yourself and show up for yourself in that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just feel it's like that's the foundation. Like we have to cultivate that. And again, it's new for a lot of us because we didn't have a model for that, through our own mothers and that relationship. So we're kind of resurrecting what I feel is, this ancient way of being in remembrance, but it's new. It's new for us as women to come back to, like, I get to be nurtured and resourced and nourished. And, again, that's how we're designed to be. Like, that's what, creates nutrients for the energy of our yin, which is that internal nourishment that exists within us, that precious nutrient of the feminine. So to have like the fullness of that, we have to be resourced in ourselves.
Oh, so yum. And last question is, what is the line of leaning on God and your partner? And like, where do you find that harmony?
Oh, this is really good. This is something I talk about a lot too. So I feel I'll start with saying, I believe union itself is two heartbeats being held in God and devoted to stewarding God's love on this planet. And in union, we get to receive God through our beloved. So I always say to women too, a good kind of compass in yourself is, does this man bring you closer to God or further away? Like, do you receive God's heart and character through the man that you're with? And for me, this has been actually edgy because I do have such a deep devotional relationship with God, and I tend to just go there and not lean as readily on my partner. And this has been something that we've had to really grow through, because men desire to help and support and be that frame for you. But right, we have to be willing to receive that love and that support and that provision and protection of the masculine. So for me, like, I'm resourced by God first, ultimately, like as my ultimate source, because I find my ultimate fulfillment in him. And I think too, this is big preparation for union itself. Like, as women, we yearn for more and we desire and long, all the live long day. And our ultimate fulfillment is only going to come from God and the divine. Like, a mortal man in all of his beauty is also still imperfect, just like us. So we have to have that frame in relationship and inner union with God first. Like, that's going to nurture the health of your union with your beloved. So the path to union is first the path to your own heart and being embraced by God. And then in union, this is where we're creating now relational intimacy with another heartbeat who has a nervous system and who has, his ways of being, and we're merging together, in this way. And for me, it's just been this practice of, being vulnerable and open and really recognizing what needs are required from my man versus what needs can be sourced from God. So kind of cultivating that discernment and like these agreements within your own relationship around how we're meeting each other's needs and desires, and creating, implicit and explicit agreements around that. And also knowing, what is first taken to God, and both my partner and I are grounded in God and our relationship with God. And that's something that does, I think, fuel the health of our relationship in so many ways, because that is the center of our relationship. And, like actual, there's of course physical needs, right? Like that too, you have to know how to source the fulfillment of that in yourself. But like, of course, there's physical needs that we receive too from a partner, like that I'm not going to get from God. So it's beautiful to receive from my husband in that way, or, like different kinds of support that we get to receive multidimensionally from our men. But I think it's like, something good to look at is like, how do I want to phrase this? It's not going into this state of like neediness or being saved by your man. So like, God is your ultimate savior and your ultimate frame, and like your ultimate, like where you anchor, right? Like that fulfillment, that wholeness, all of that. But like your partner is someone who can beautifully provide for different needs as like an extension of God. But it's not this like entitlement of, oh, I need him to do that. It's like, oh, where do I just get to receive this like overflow of God's support in my life through my man and through what he offers me? And then again, we cultivate this devotional circuitry. It's like through my devotion and love as a woman that inspires his provision and like this dome of protection that he holds over me.
So beautiful. I love that. And that's such a good point, because it can be so easy to just fall into like the princess, so like save me, like do everything for me. The entitlement is so real, especially in the spiritual community. I was so entitled for a while and not realizing it. And then I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. That is not your responsibility.
No. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's like one of the biggest things. It's like, we can't, make men responsible for, oh, there's just so much in this, because, even even I think David Data teaches, and I love and appreciate David Data, but he says, like a masculine man should be able to hold and handle like the feminine storm. But there's an aspect of that actually I believe isn't rightful. Like you as a woman have to know how to stand in your own storm and alchemize the emotions and what you're moving through, not necessarily before you bring it to a man, but you have to know how to hold yourself in that. You can't expect a man to fix it for you or to save you from it. And like, again, it's like that damsel in distress energy. Like, are you always sourcing your wholeness and your fulfillment and all these things from your man? Because that will create a very fractured relationship and a malnourished relationship eventually in many ways. So we have to, really come into that state of wholeness and responsibility in ourselves. And that's where we lean upon God. And then we bring our fullness, to the relationship with our man, like as something that is a nutrient for the expression of union itself.
I love how you phrase everything. Thanks so much. And the last question of the podcast is, what is one of your favorite romantic memories?
Oh my goodness. I would say, gosh, just even, well, there's been a couple this year because I've had, quite an expansive year, but I would say, I got engaged this past summer to my beloved, and we just had a beautiful day. And this was a long awaited day, and a day that did take me by surprise in my favorite place. And my partner just put so much love and care and devotion into that whole process and the day itself. And it's, just like a romantic memory and moment that I cherish in my heart so deeply.
I love, to me, that's really romance, is that thoughtfulness and presence and devotion to love. So what a beautiful one. And would love for you to share how people can find you and work with you.
Yeah, I have my Instagram, I would say is the best place, at least for right now. I do take sporadic breaks on Instagram, but my Instagram is at way_of_grace. So that's where I share a lot of devotional content and teachings. I also have a YouTube channel and a podcast, the Way of Grace podcast, which will be relaunching in early 2024. So those are great places to land and dive deeper into these kinds of conversations. And we do have a monthly membership. So every month we meet 3 times a month through teaching transmission, somatic practice, guest speaking calls, community counsel, exploring pretty much all the topics we discussed today, but restoring relationship with God, reclaiming your beloved identity, healing with the masculine, resurrecting your feminine essence. We just traverse this beautiful realm of the feminine together. So that's, a really lovely place if you're really looking to, embolden your faith and walk with God more devotionally and really be embodied in the way of the heart.
Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your gifts and your words with us today. It was such a beautiful journey.
Thank you so much, Lexi. This was such a beautiful conversation, and I'm so grateful for you.
You made it to the end of the episode, so now it's time for our snuggly heart breath of the day. Place a hand or both hands, if it's safe to do so, over your heart and take a big breath into your heart center. Open your mouth and let it go. I'm so grateful to have shared this time with you. If you enjoyed this convo, please share with your besties and your fam. And if you're a visual person like me, fly over to YouTube and watch the video. If you want to do a random act of kindness today, please leave a 5-star review so more people in the world can get their heart snuggled. You're helping tremendously when you do this, so thank you so much. And as a gift for doing so, I'll give you my Soften Your Heart Medi that feels like an exhale and a hug from within. When you leave a review and email me the screenshot to heartsnuggles@alivetoenjoy.com, you can also find the email in the show notes and you'll get the free meditation. Sending you the warmest, comfiest hug and lots of unexpected blessings your way. Remember that every single person just wants to be loved. So how can you be loved today?